Long time no see. This is YouTube Medical University. Do you think cancer is determined by genetics? Actually, more than half of that is a lie. According to data from the National Cancer Center, genetics are involved in only about 5 to 10% of the causes of cancer. The majority of the rest are infections, diet, smoking, drinking, and lack of exercise. In other words, your daily habits. To add to that, the 5 differences I'll be talking about today are all things you can start using as soon as tomorrow, and one of them is even brushing your teeth. Cancer and brushing your teeth. It doesn't really make sense, does it? But that's what the data from 70,000 people is telling us. And in the second half of today's video, I'll be talking about a certain condition that actually increases the mortality rate from cancer by about 34%. This isn't about diet or exercise. It's about the mind. Be sure to listen until the end. Here's today's lesson outline. In the first period, I'll talk about why small habits can influence cancer risk, the fascinating mechanisms behind it, and share stories of patients who actually came to my clinic. And the second period is the main topic. I'll introduce 5 surprising differences between people who get cancer and those who don't. In the third period, I'll explain what you should start doing tomorrow. I'll introduce specific meal recipes, lifestyle tips, and finally, the most important 6th surprising difference. Now let's start with the first period. Why do our daily habits flip the switch on cancer? First, there's something I'd like you all to imagine. Please imagine the drain pipes in your house. Every day, a little bit of oil flows down them. Nothing happens in just one day. Even after a week, it's probably still fine. But what happens if you leave it for 5 or 10 years? It gets clogged, right? Cancer is actually similar to this. Actually, most cancers don't suddenly develop in just one day. Normal cells get damaged, then they get repaired, and then they get damaged again. As this cycle of damage and repair repeats over many years, one day a mistake happens during the repair process. As those mistakes accumulate, cancer cells are eventually created. The key word here is chronic inflammation. It may sound complicated, but it's actually simple. It's like a small fire smoldering somewhere in your body all the time. For example, repeatedly burning the lining of your throat with hot drinks, or bacteria from gum disease continuously causing inflammation in your gums. None of these cause problems after just one time. But if that continues for 10 years, it's a different story. In other words, what increases the risk of cancer isn't a single major harmful event, but the accumulation of daily habits. Conversely, if you change your daily habits just a little, you might be able to reduce this ongoing inflammation. In fact, I had a patient like this in my clinic, a 58-year-old man. He thought he was healthy because his company health checkups kept coming back normal. However, one day he felt some discomfort in his stomach and went to the hospital, where he found out he was infected with Helicobacter pylori. Upon reflection, he realized he hadn't visited the dentist in over 5 years and had always dismissed his bleeding gums as normal. His meals were mostly convenience store bento or sweetbread, and his favorite drink was piping hot tea. I'll talk about the habits I just mentioned in the second part, but actually there are a lot of habits that can increase the risk of cancer. Fortunately, the Helicobacter pylori bacteria was found early and successfully eradicated. But since these habits can also lead to cancer, I told him that we should review each one carefully. He said, "I thought cancer was hereditary. No one at the hospital ever told me that things like diet and lifestyle habits could change my risk." These words are the reason I created today's lesson. Just knowing or not knowing, that's all it takes. Your body might change in 10 years, so today I'll use concrete data. It's not that I want to scare you, but I want you to know that you can change. Now let's get right into the main topic, the second period. Let's take a look at the surprising differences between people who get cancer and those who don't, one by one. 5 surprising differences between people who get cancer and those who don't. First, how often you brush your teeth. Toothbrushing and cancer. There is data on this. This is a paper published in the medical journal Anti-Cancer Research in 2019. A study was conducted on about 70,000 people in Japan who underwent health checkups, dividing them into 4 groups based on how often they brushed their teeth. When using those who brushed after every meal as the standard, those who did not brush their teeth every day had a 1.5 times higher overall cancer risk, meaning their risk was about 50% higher. Even people who brushed only once a day had a 1.25 times higher risk, which means their risk was about 25% higher. The reason is the chronic inflammation I talked about in the first part. There are hundreds of types of bacteria in the mouth. If you neglect brushing your teeth, periodontal bacteria increase, and inflammation persists due to inadequate brushing. Furthermore, the bacteria in your mouth also have the ability to turn alcohol into acetaldehyde, which is a carcinogenic substance. So, if your mouth is dirty, the entrance to your esophagus and stomach are exposed to carcinogenic substances little by little every day. If I were to use a drain pipe as an example, it's like a small amount of acid keeps flowing along with grease every day, causing the pipe to rust little by little over time. However, this study produced some interesting results. People who brushed their teeth twice a day actually had better outcomes than those who brushed 3 times after every meal. They actually had the lowest risk of cancer. So instead of obsessively brushing after every meal, it might be more important to simply make sure you brush at least twice a day. And to prevent periodontal disease, flossing is also important. Using an interdental brush to remove plaque between your teeth is very important for preventing cavities and periodontal disease. By the way, I'm not being sponsored or anything, but I personally use this Clinica interdental brush. 5 surprising differences between people who get cancer and those who don't. Here's number 2. It's the temperature of your drinks. It might be more important at what temperature you drink something than what you actually drink. This is a paper from 2018. It followed about 450,000 adults in China for 9.2 years. Here are the results. The group that drank hot tea every day and also consumed the most alcohol had about 5 times the risk of esophageal cancer. Even for those who only drank hot tea, the risk of esophageal cancer was nearly twice as high. The mechanism behind this is easy to understand. When a hot liquid over 65 degrees passes through the esophagus, the mucous membrane of the esophagus is physically damaged. If it's only once, it can be repaired, but every morning, what if you keep doing it every morning and every night for 10 years? It's like pouring boiling water down a drain every day, melting the inner walls of the pipe. And furthermore, there's something I want to tell you all regarding the risk of esophageal cancer. If your face turns red when you drink alcohol, you should be especially cautious about esophageal cancer. People like this are called flushers, and about 40% of Japanese people fall into this category. If people with this constitution continue to drink alcohol, they can't break down a substance called acetaldehyde, so carcinogenic substances stay in their body longer, which increases the risk of esophageal cancer. And furthermore, if you add the habit of drinking hot beverages, as I mentioned earlier, the risk becomes about 5 times higher. So, freshly brewed tea or coffee is certainly delicious, but you should let it cool for 2 or 3 minutes before drinking. I recommend that you act as if you have a sensitive tongue and avoid very hot drinks. Here are 5 surprising differences between people who get cancer and those who don't. The third one is this. It's mushrooms. Mushrooms are pretty plain, right? They're not considered a superfood, and you rarely see them hyped up on TV. However, there's a research paper based on data from Japan. This is a 2020 study from Miyazaki Prefecture. They followed about 30,000 Japanese men for a median period of around 13 years. As a result, compared to the group that ate mushrooms less than once a week, the group that ate them 3 or more times a week had about a 17% lower risk of prostate cancer. When you hear 17%, you might think it's not much, but if you think about it, we're not talking about medicine here. It's just shiitake or shimeji mushrooms. Even if one pack is pricey, it's just 100 to 200 yen. There are no side effects, and you can simply add them to your miso soup daily. They also contain vitamin D, an important vitamin that helps strengthen your bones. It's not a flashy miracle drug, but it's relatively inexpensive, easy to eat, and easy to keep up with, so please try to be mindful of it. By the way, what exactly in mushrooms is effective? Actually, we don't know for sure. One of the leading candidates is ergothioneine, which is an antioxidant. This substance is especially abundant in mushrooms, and it works to reduce the damage caused by the oxidation of cells. It's important to note this is an observational study, reviewing past data, so simply eating mushrooms, we can't say for certain that it will definitely reduce the risk of prostate cancer, but from a health perspective, I think consciously including mushrooms in your diet is a smart choice. 5 surprising differences between people who get cancer and those who don't. Here's number 4. It's coffee. Everyone, you probably heard for a long time that you shouldn't drink coffee because it has a lot of caffeine. However, the current consensus in the medical field has completely changed, and now it's believed that drinking about 1 to 3 cups of coffee a day is actually good for your health. And what I want to focus on here is the relationship between coffee and liver cancer. Liver cancer is called the silent cancer because it has almost no early symptoms, and in many cases, by the time you notice it, the disease has already progressed. In that sense, data showing a reduced risk for this kind of cancer is quite valuable. In a study led by the National Cancer Center of Japan, about 90,000 Japanese people were followed for 10 years. As a result, compared to the group that hardly drank coffee, those who drank 1 to 2 cups a day had about a 48% lower risk, those who drank 3 to 4 cups had about a 52% lower risk, and those who drank 5 or more cups had about a 76% lower risk. These numbers are so large that they almost seem suspicious, don't they? However, even when looking at the absolute numbers over 10 years, while about 500 people who didn't drink coffee developed the disease, only about 200 people who drank coffee every day did, which is less than half. Furthermore, even when limited to people with hepatitis B or hepatitis C, those who drank coffee tended to have a lower risk. Why coffee is so effective at lowering liver cancer risk is still not fully understood, but it's thought that chlorogenic acid and polyphenols found in coffee may help suppress inflammation in the liver. For those who can drink it, drinking coffee within a reasonable amount may actually help lower the risk of liver cancer. However, if you add a lot of sugar or cream, it can increase other risks like diabetes and high cholesterol. So, if possible, I recommend drinking it black, or if you need to add something, just a small amount of milk. If you have a sensitive stomach, sleep issues, heart disease, or see a psychiatrist, don't force yourself to drink coffee. Consult your doctor first. The surprising differences between people who get cancer and those who don't. Here are 5. The 5th one is this: ultra-processed foods. We've talked about ultra-processed foods several times on the YouTube Medical University channel. In the UK, they are called ultra-processed foods, or UPF. This includes snack foods, sweetbreads, soft drinks, and processed meats. To give you an idea, it's like when you look at the ingredient list on the back of foods in your fridge and see a long list of unfamiliar ingredients written in katakana. Many of those are ultra-processed foods. In 2018, a study published in the reputable medical journal BMJ tracked about 100,000 people for 8 years. It showed that for every 10% increase in the proportion of ultra-processed foods in the overall diet, the risk of cancer increased by about 12%. In other words, the more you consume, the higher your risk of cancer. What does a 10% increase mean? If out of 3 meals a day you have something like convenience store pastries and coffee for breakfast, about 30% of your diet consists of ultra-processed foods. So your cancer risk could be rising much more than just 10%, it could be going up significantly. And what's interesting about this study is, isn't it just that ultra-processed foods are high in sugar, salt, and fat, and that's what ends up increasing the cancer risk? That's what people tend to think, but even after adjusting for the amounts of sugar, salt, and fat, in other words, even after accounting for their effects, people who ate more ultra-processed foods still had a higher cancer risk. In other words, there's something that can't be explained just by poor nutritional balance. Whether it's the effect of additives or substances included during processing, the causal relationship isn't clear, but I hope you'll be a little more careful, even if just a bit. It's unrealistic to completely eliminate ultra-processed foods, and I actually eat them sometimes myself, so the key is to reduce the proportion of them in your diet. For example, switching from sweetbreads to rice balls, replacing soft drinks with unsweetened tea, choosing frozen udon instead of cup noodles, and adding eggs or vegetables. It's okay if it's not perfect. Making slightly better choices and building on those small changes is what really matters, I think. How was it? If you found this helpful or thought, that makes sense, I'd be really happy if you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new videos. So, to summarize the second part so far, here are 5 surprising differences between people who get cancer and those who don't. First, brushing your teeth. People who don't brush have about a 50% higher risk of cancer. Second is the temperature of your drinks. If you keep drinking beverages hotter than 65 degrees Celsius every day, your risk of esophageal cancer increases. Third, mushrooms. Eating them 3 times a week lowers your risk of prostate cancer by about 17%. Fourth, coffee. Drinking 3 to 4 cups every day cuts your risk of liver cancer by about half. Fifth, for every 10% increase in ultra-processed foods, your cancer risk goes up. That's what I talked about. So, what exactly should you do? I'll discuss that in part 3. Now part 3 is about lifestyle habits you can start tomorrow to lower your cancer risk. In part 2, we learned what makes the difference. From here, I'll talk about how you can keep it up every day and how to incorporate it into your daily life. I'll explain as concretely as possible. The first is your morning routine. I recommend morning coffee and mushroom soup. I think many people start their day by drinking coffee as soon as they wake up. Here, just one thing everyone, please make a rule. In the morning, after you pour your coffee, wait just 2 minutes. This takes care of the second point from part 2. The risk of drinking something too hot will disappear. And what I want to recommend for breakfast is a simple mushroom soup. The method is surprisingly easy. On your day off, separate your favorite mushrooms like shimeji, enoki and maitake, wrap them in plastic wrap and freeze them. Then, when you wake up in the morning, put those frozen mushrooms in a mug, add some miso or instant wakame soup base and pour hot water over it. Your mushroom soup is ready. You don't need a knife or a pot, just a kettle and a mug are enough. And if you have some extra time in the morning, I recommend this variation. Warm up 200 ml of soy milk in a pot, then add the frozen mushrooms and dissolve some miso in it. I will provide a free document summarizing the cancer risk reducing lifestyle habits and recipes I introduced this time. If you want to take control of your own health, maintain it, or reduce your future risks, please register for free and get it. And next, here are my recommendations for lunch. The goal for lunch is to reduce the proportion of ultra-processed foods by 10%. When it comes to lunch, it's often from convenience stores, company cafeterias, or eating out. It's hard to make a perfect lunch, isn't it? So, try changing your mindset a bit. Since lunch tends to be less balanced, make a conscious effort to reduce even just one ultra-processed food item. Just swap out one thing. For example, if you usually have a sweet pastry, switch it to a rice ball. Switch from sweet canned coffee to black coffee. Change cup noodles to frozen udon. I'll say it again, it's difficult to completely eliminate ultra-processed foods, so the goal is to reduce their proportion. What do you want to be mindful of? Are you already paying attention to this? Let me know in the comments, even just a word. Lastly, let's discuss nighttime habits. Brushing your teeth before bed is the most important thing for cancer prevention. I think many of you are already doing this. Here's one habit I recommend. How about flossing once a day before you go to bed? Since cavity-causing bacteria tend to multiply while you sleep at night, it's important to thoroughly remove food debris with an interdental brush before going to bed. And I have a recommendation. If you tend to forget to floss in front of the mirror and you have a habit of relaxing and watching TV at night, try keeping your floss next to the TV remote. Just by doing this, your chances of making it a habit will increase. I also put my floss in a box like this, and although it's a bit embarrassing, I floss while relaxing and watching TV at night. Of course, it's probably better to floss in front of a mirror while checking the condition of your teeth, but I think it's better to do it this way than not to do it at all, so that's what I do too. Let me tell you about the most important difference. It's the difference between people who are lonely and people who have connections. Up until now, I've talked about diet and lifestyle habits. However, the difference I wanted to share with you the most is the sixth one that I'm about to introduce. This is the latest paper from 2025. It's a study that gathered and integrated research from around the world focusing on cancer patients. People who are socially isolated or feel a strong sense of loneliness had about an 11% higher risk of death from cancer compared to those who are not. And when comparing overall mortality rates, it was about 34% higher. That's even higher than the risk from ultra-processed foods that I introduced today. And what I want to convey with this study is that it's not about whether you get cancer or not, but rather about the mortality rate from cancer. People who feel lonely may not have anyone to consult with, even if they notice something wrong with their body. And as a result, they delay seeing a doctor and their motivation to continue treatment decreases. They might skip checkups, thinking it's not a big deal. I think that when connections are weak, there's a high risk that these kinds of things quietly build up over time. So, even if it's just once a week or for a short time, it's good to connect with friends, neighbors, or family. Whether it's by phone or online, why not try valuing the act of talking to someone? I think there are also people who don't really like talking to others. For those people, I think it's also important to learn about illnesses through YouTube like this. Read comments from others, see what they're thinking about, gain knowledge, and try to notice any changes early so you can detect problems as soon as possible. So that's it. Connections with other people can also be like medicine. You don't need a prescription. There are no side effects. Just try to make a conscious effort to schedule a conversation. Even if it's just once a month, why not give it a try? Now, to wrap things up, here's a summary of today's video. The difference between people who get cancer and those who don't. First, flossing twice a day and before bed. Second, the temperature of your drinks. Drink them at a temperature that's comfortable for someone with a sensitive tongue. Third, mushrooms. Just add mushrooms to your miso soup 3 times a week. Fourth, drink your coffee black. The guideline is 2 to 3 cups a day. Fifth, ultra-processed foods. Replace just one item to lower the proportion. And then, the most important difference is your connection with others. Talk to someone once a week. All of these are things you can start doing today. Don't strive for perfection. Even adding one thing to your routine would make me happy. Have you chosen what to start today? If you've decided, I'd be happy if you could declare in the comments, I'll do wancha ke have. For example, I'll buy floss, or I'll make mushroom miso soup. Writing it down will increase your chances of following through. And if you found something interesting in this video, please give it a thumbs up. And before you forget which channel this is, please make sure to subscribe. Many people haven't subscribed yet, so I'd appreciate your support by hitting the subscribe button. Thanks for watching. As a general practitioner, I've learned from my patients how to live without aging, even in your 70s and beyond. I want to live like this too. I never knew there was such a way of life. This is filled with stories I've learned from many patients. Chatting with friends is more important than exercise. When it comes to medicine, less is more. This is packed with wisdom from seniors on how to live healthily and happily at any age. Please check it out from the link in the description.